Live now.
Welcome to the Node.js Community Technical Steering Committee for November 29th, 2017. On our standard agenda, first we start with announcements. Does anybody have any announcements this week? No? Okay, we'll move on to the agenda then. We have a number of issues tagged under Node.js Node, TSC, and another one that Miles asked that we added to the agenda. So the first one is enable explicit.m.js intent for ESM 16170. I'm just going to open that up.
Just like a forward on this again from last week, or the week before maybe. This has progressed from the issue title and is no longer really the same thing as the issue title was about.
Okay, are you the right person to give us the context as to what the question discussion for the TSC is on this one?
No, but I do know the post that is probably in question now, which is probably this comment, where I think Web Reflection is summarizing everything, and then Miles responded to that. I'm not really certain if there's anything we can address on this at this time, though.
Okay, so basically, do you think it's just like a request for people to look at it and I guess maybe coordinate with Miles? His request was that we do discuss he's planning to do a Foundation Medium blog post on modules. He'd sent out that through email for discussion. I think he just wanted us to chime in on whether we disagreed with putting that out in the Foundation Medium blog as opposed to anywhere else. I'd expect it's related to this ESM issue because he's clarifying the position on some aspects, maybe not at least where we're at on each of those different aspects. So I guess while we're talking here, we might as well, does anybody oppose or think that there's a better place for him to post that versus the Foundation Medium blog post? Okay, so I'm just going to take notes that there were no objections to using the Foundation Medium blog.
I haven't gotten a chance to look at it yet, the draft.
Or his draft, right? Like, I guess that went out a little while ago. I can't remember exactly when now, but...
So I do want to bring up a separate issue besides that one comment in that thread. In that thread, there's a thought that we don't need to be able to import non-ESM modules. And whatever we do with response to that, we should include any response we have to importing non-ESM in the blog post or wherever it ends up.
Right, I think the blog post, he was just trying to clarify where we were at. That one, if I remember correctly, he was going to say we haven't come to consensus yet. Right, it still sounds like some people think it would be good to have import support, both old and new modules. Other people think, well, you could just have it, just do ESM modules, right? So we still need more discussion to come what our position would be.
Yeah, it's not just ESM and CJS. We're talking about all sorts of kinds of modules. So JSON, .node files,
Right.
WASM. Now there's an HTML one. So we need to just make it a little more generic than just CJS ESM.
Okay, right. There are a number. Are those others that are handled by the browser as well? do they even make sense in the browser, I guess, like the JSON ones maybe?
They're planned in various forms, but they're going very slow on it. WASM for sure has some integration. JSON, I'm not sure, but it is potential to actually do it if somebody champions it.
Right. Okay, so was there something like on that front, is that just for awareness, or was there something you wanted us to dig in on that front?
In particular, we have two older formats that are not CJS that should be included in that discussion. So it's not just old versus new modules. We have to consider every single module type separately.
Okay. Okay, so it sounds like we should, I know Miles, like for the past one, had scheduled a time to get people who are interested together to hash some stuff out. It sounds like we need another one to cover that topic. Is that a reasonable next action?
Likely.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear.
Yeah, I think we likely probably need that.
Okay, so I'm just going to put in as a next action, Miles, to schedule working session, which includes this and other topics that we don't have consensus on. Okay, on that issue 16170, are there any other things that people want to point out, or discussion that we think we need to or should have now? Okay, so I think our next action is, we'll ask Miles to set that up, move on. Okay, the next issue is 15608. Runtime deprecate buffer num by default. Just going to open that up and take a look to see who added that to the agenda. I guess that was BridgeAR who added it. Ruben, and basically the comments says there wasn't much discussion. Maybe this will suggest that we have it. Right, and I see, Rich, you followed up to ask on questions, although I saw Rich in the chat. Let's see him on the conference. Okay, so the specific question is, if and when buffer constructor is deprecated, might buffer num be deprecated before other forms of buffer constructor? Or will they be deprecated all at once? And Anna had commented back that her answer was no, because the overload of buffer constructor cannot be relied upon. The overload of the buffer constructor that cannot be relied upon is buffer string, because when people intend to use a latter one that an information leak was possible in previous node versions, and a possible DOS vector was present. The buffer num variant is consistent with typed array spec, and since buffer is typed array, we should make it available. Do other people have comments, thoughts beyond that?
I do not entirely agree on the last comment, because the buffer num behavior is different from Node.js version to Node.js version. So on older Node.js versions, for example, LTS, buffer num does not behave exactly like a contact array flag. But I still think that we should deprecate them together, and hopefully in 10.0 or something like that.
So I guess, are you know, the specific question that was being asked is, would we deprecate that one before the others or all at the same time? I didn't quite parse whether you were saying you think it would be at the same time or...
I think that both should happen in 10.0, but I'm not yet sure would it make sense to get one that if we don't agree on the other one. For example, if we don't agree on on runtime deprecation buffer string, will it make sense to deprecate buffer num or not? I'm not sure yet on that.
Right, okay. Any other discussion? I think otherwise, you know, it's, I think, back to the GitHub issue. Anybody else has any more suggestion or something? I guess what we need is somebody on the GitHub issue who's going to sort of champion bringing the discussion back to the TSC in terms of, maybe let's take it back to GitHub for one more week, and then if we can maybe identify somebody who's going to, you know, lead the discussion here when it comes back.
Can we, in future, can we ask that if things get labeled TSC agenda, that they also come with a description of why it's on the agenda? Because this is a repeating discussion. I can't see there's anything particularly new here, and perhaps there's a good reason for labeling it, but without that reason, it's just going to lead to wasted time here because we've been over this 100 times.
Yeah,
so maybe we need to have a rule. If there's no summary or nobody to champion at the meeting, it just doesn't get on.
Yeah. That's a good thing. I think maybe we should discuss that in another issue separate from this one, but it seems like, it does seem like we need a way to make some of these discussions more effective. Because there was, I mean, they added a question. Rich worked to try and get a specific question. But I don't know that, like, we don't have what we need is somebody to champion the discussion on that question, explain why it's important to make a decision, and then, you know, push for a decision if we're going to get it there. Better frame what the next one on the agenda is 14815. Opening that one up. Interval timer includes callback duration. Looking to see. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this is, I tagged this. Right. So this is an issue that's been open for a while. I didn't really know what to do with it. So I might as well bring it up to the TSC because I don't really know what the correct behavior is here. So currently, set intervals in particular. So if you have a set interval and it has a callback that takes a significant amount of time, the next interval will be scheduled at the end of your callback. So if you have something that takes a lot of time, it can delay the next one by quite a bit. So what this pull request does is it changes essentially where the start time would theoretically be to the beginning of when the callback is called. And from what I can tell, browsers already have this behavior. They seem to schedule the next one when at the beginning of your callback. I can't tell 100% for sure, but the test that's included with this pull request seems to pass in browsers.
What happens if you, like, your callback always runs too long? Are you going to continually stack up more and more and more, or?
Currently, yes. With this patch, you wouldn't. So there's some concerns that have been raised in this thread if that is really like the intended behavior that we want, because it kind of changes like timing expectations around intervals. I know some people have brought up that it might be good to do what browsers do in this case. And that seems to be what this pull request does. Although it wasn't intended for browser compatibility, it was intended to, essentially fix something else. But it's hard to tell if this is the behavior we want or not. I don't really know.
So, but is the new, if the new behavior, with the new behavior, if we have an interval of say 5 seconds and it takes 10 seconds for my callback to run, what happens 5 seconds in?
Nothing, because we're single threaded, obviously. But at the end of that, you'll have an event loop turn, and immediately in that event loop turn, you'll have the next one call.
Right. Okay. So it was effectively scheduled at that.
Well, that's what this pull request would do. But the old way, you would get it would be 5 seconds again after your 10-second callback, which would have been 15 seconds from when the first callback was initially called.
Right.
So there's actually a 15-second gap rather than a 5-second gap.
Yeah. It seems to me, yeah, I guess it's, so, and from what you've said, the browsers seem to do it the new way, which would be that you'll immediately be scheduled if you're past your deadline.
Yeah, it would seem like it.
And say you run for, you've got a 5-second interval, you run for 20 seconds, would you actually have multiple of them queued up, or is it?
No, you won't queue multiple. You'll just always queue one immediately.
Right. But
So
you'll run.
that would be on the browsers.
Pardon?
Browsers should queue on the timer.
I mean, you're effectively queuing it, but there's not really a point in queuing if you're always taking longer than your duration and you're always immediately running another one. You're essentially queuing up anyways.
You could in fact catch up over time. So for example, you had one that took 20 seconds, but then they take 1 second after that. You could catch up if you'd queued all 4, say.
I feel like we will probably not do queuing. Or at least I don't want to implement it. It's not going to be pretty.
Other people have thoughts on, like, does the new way or old way, like, does the new way sound reasonable or not?
Just on second thought, queuing might not be that bad. And again, I only brought this up because I didn't really know what to do with it. So
yeah, I mean, I guess there's like, we need to make a decision in terms of, there's a PR, it's asking to make this change. And I guess it would land unless there's objections, right? So it's Does anybody object to that? It kind of makes sense to me that you would queue on the interval, and if it's compatible with the browser, that seems like another good reason. Of course, balanced by the risk of, you know, actually breaking people.
Yeah, so it's, I would say probably almost certainly breaking change, and it might be pretty difficult to tell what might break with it. I'm assuming there's not too much code that would rely on this behavior, but you might have something that does somewhere.
Yeah, the main difference would be you would continually run that particular callback. So,
I mean, you'll still get async work in between because you'll still run the event loop every time it in between the callbacks, but you won't have scheduled time between the callbacks.
right. So our question is, how do we close on this? You know, I lean towards thinking it sounds like it's the right behavior, and you know, as long as it's in December major, we would move forward. You know, what do other people think on that front?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so I guess what we'll say is, you know, based on discussion in the TSC, we'll post a comment in that says, you know, we believe we believe that the new behavior sounds like the right thing to do, and you know, given that it's provided it's December major, we'll give the okay to move forward.
Do you want to see if we can get that behavior more towards browsers first, or do we want to go ahead with this? I mean, in terms of queuing this.
Right.
I'm
So then I guess we
confused.
could, yeah. Do we want to ask that they check, or do we want to check that? Ideally, it would be nice to have it be the same as the browser, right? Like if we're going to change it, unless there's a reason not to be the same as the browsers, it would be good to be the same.
Guess we can probably do that in this PR too.
We could. What? That would be, I guess, another breaking change, right?
Yeah, but they're both likely to go into 10, I guess, regardless, because 10 would be far enough out.
Yeah. So, or you know, I guess we could say, yeah, this looks good. One thing that we did discuss that would be nice to follow up on is, you know, should it queue? Do the browsers queue? And if so, should we also queue? Right? But not necessarily make that a requirement for this landing. Is that where we're seem to be ending up? I guess I'll take. Nobody suggesting something else is that's what we'll do. I'll add a comment to the issue after the meeting and add in some notes there. Moving on to the next issue. The next one is 423, which is our review of the strategic initiatives. So I'm going to pull that up. So we'll skip the ones that we don't have the champions for. First one is an API. I mentioned last time that we were working on a plan for getting out of experimental with the Thanksgiving break last week. We didn't actually get to that, so I'm hoping that we'll get to that next week. Push continues on documentation and testing, but that's all I'll have to say this week. Rod, OpenSSL evolution. Rod, you still there? You may be on
Yep,
mute. There you
yeah.
go. Okay.
Sorry, yeah, no, nothing to report on that. Still work in progress. It's just documentation that needs to get done.
I'm just skipping down. New Streams API. So Jeremiah, anything to report on that front? Jeremiah, I think you may be muted. Or we may have lost. Yeah, no, now you're back. Jeremiah, we were just at the initiative's New Streams APIs. Do you have anything to report on that front? You're on mute if you're talking.
We're waiting for him to sort that out. I've been working more on the C side of it. I should have an updated PR early next week.
Okay. Since you're back, I skipped some of the other ones. So HTTP2, anything to report on that front?
HP2, just ongoing effort. Right now I'm working on refactoring the lifecycle of the session and a stream. It's just, ongoing effort to improve it.
Okay. And I guess it's still, the next major milestone is getting out of experimental.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, the goal is to try to get it out of experimental by 10, but there's still a lot to do between
on. Error messages?
Error messages are progressing. We landed quite a few updates before 9 went out. There are still several hundred errors left to convert, mostly on the C side. We have ongoing efforts to get those done. It's going to be kind of a slow but sure process, and hopefully we'll get them all done before 10.
Yeah, if I sent you an email just saying if you gave us some context, Nico would help on some of that. So I don't know if you missed that one, I can resend it.
Yeah, I probably did. I'm pretty backed up.
Yeah, I'll resend it because he's volunteering to help out on the C side of it. So I'll redo that. Core Promise APIs.
That one is a little bit lower priority for me. I'll probably have an update for the FS module sometime mid-December.
Okay, Jeremiah, on your side, I guess James mentioned he's been working on part of the streams. The part you're working on, any update to report?
Yeah, I should have an update for the JavaScript side in a day or two. I think I had a bunch of stuff done. I just haven't pushed it up to my repo. Yeah, still need to sync with James on it.
Okay. Don't think Rich is here. Trevor's. V8 currency, anything on that front, Michael? Blockers or anything?
No, nothing new to report.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I think that's the list that we have champions for. I guess we need volunteers for some, but I'll skip that for this week. Think about that a bit more. Okay, so back to the next issues. The next one is 371, which is the register node MIME specific types. Just opening that up, take a look. See who tagged it and what the discussion is.
So the IES G to us after we tried to register a MIME type, and they wanted it to be moved to standards track, and that means recognizing a standards organization as the controller. When we were registering outside of standards track, that was going to be the TSC, and I would feel more comfortable if we put the node foundation itself as the controller for something if it's standard.
That's really not necessary. I mean, it can still be the TSC. I've been through this process several times already.
But if there's any organizational change, it'll no longer be recognized.
If we set it up as generically as the TSC, then it should be, because the TSC is an official component of the node foundation. It would require a complete recharter of the foundation in order for it to go away. When we're not tying it to any individual people within the TSC.
But this is the standards organization that it's recognizing. necessarily the change controller on the registration.
It doesn't have to be a legal entity. I mean, for example, I mean, we've when I was doing the activity streams specifications, right? We had a loose system of companies that were involved, where the basically some of the stuff there was pushed through as just, it wasn't even a legal entity. It was just this group of companies was the change controller for stuff. There's, like I said, I've been through this process before, and the requirements are really not that strict.
No, it's not the change controller. The change controller remains unstrict, and we can leave that as the TSC. They're asking for the standards organization that owns the registration, which I don't see the TSC as a standards organization. I see the Node Foundation as a standards organization.
Well, I mean, I see what you're saying. I just don't think we need to be that pedantic about it. So I don't think it matters.
And I've been talking to Rick about it as well.
If it doesn't matter, I would feel more comfortable with a legal entity, even if the TSC actually controls it and is the change controller.
Okay.
If I understand what the suggestion is, we leave the TSC as the change controller, and standards org is identified as foundation.
That would be what I suggest, but we can make the TSC the standards organization. That just seems odd to me.
And what is the, so if we make the standards organization the foundation, what does that actually mean in practical terms?
Nothing much. It's listing them in the record. You don't even actually require any action whatsoever on the part of the board of the foundation.
Okay. And
my preference would be for the TSC to be listed as the standards, or my vote would be for the TSC in that slot.
Just to clarify, the contact information would be what in each case? Would it still be both? Would it still be just the TSC in both cases?
Correct.
Okay, so Rod, I didn't quite catch what you said. You suggested we have the TSC as both. Was that it?
Yes, I'd just rather see the TSC as both.
I guess if it doesn't really matter, like practically, then Bradley, is there any downside to just leaving the TSC as both?
That means we have to do this again and get a separate for anything that doesn't go through the TSC.
What is that? I'm not quite sure I understand what that means. Like, we'll have to resubmit because we are the other way, or?
If there's some part of the Node Foundation that is recognized as the standards body controlling something, so we've started to take projects under the Node Foundation that aren't entirely overseen by the TSC, to my knowledge, like Node Report. Everything bubbles through the TSC, but I don't think if we go through any standardization or RFCs that are for those, we necessarily want them to be controlled by the TSC when that's not in their organization normally.
Like the Node Report example myself, I would actually have said no, having come in under the Node.js repo. The assumption is that, you know, the TSC is the final backstop.
The TSC sits in the same hierarchy for all these projects as the board does. So if you're going to say the board, it's the same thing, unless the board chooses to spin up some other technical organization. But for now, this is the technical organization, and this is the peak of the technical organization. So just makes sense to limit the scope of this thing.
So I guess, you know, what I'm hearing is there are some people who definitely think it should be the TSC. Bradley, your starting thought was, you know, shouldn't be. Do people feel strongly enough that, you know, we need to take it to a vote, or?
If there's only silence and no major objections, I will put the foundation, I guess.
Right. I guess I've heard James, though, and Rod both say they prefer it to be the TSC.
Yeah, I've only heard a preference for it being the TSC from the TSC and not the foundation from the TSC. Is there anyone that would prefer that?
For the record, I'm registering a major objection then. If you need a major objection, it just should be the TSC, not the board.
Okay, I disagree. It's not going to be the board, technically, if we put the foundation either.
Right. So, okay. So I guess, Bradley, you know, it sounds like we've got at least a couple people who feel strongly it should be the TSC. You know, comes down to.
I will put it the TSC, but I very strongly disagree.
Okay. Okay, so we'll move forward with it as the TSC for now, I think is what I'm hearing. So, okay.
We won't be able to. Not a for now. It's just.
Yeah.
We will use it.
Yeah, we'll move forward with it as the TSC. How about that? Okay. Okay. Other was the Foundation Medium blog post on modules. We already discussed that. I think the key thing, Miles, was wanted to make sure there were no objections to using the Foundation Medium blog, and he's going to publish it. So I would also say if you have, you know, sort of last chance to look at the draft he sent out, because it's going to go out, you know, imminently. That's the end of our regular agenda, I guess. Are there any other agenda items people would like to add on? No, I guess we should go to Q&A. So, Jeremiah, any questions on the live stream? I'm going to look at the issue.
I don't see any, so maybe if you can, yeah, if anyone has questions, you know, ask it on the YouTube live stream or on IRC, and we will answer those. And maybe you can go over the meeting dates that are coming up.
Sure. Let me open up the calendar while we do that. Calendar. Okay, so upcoming meetings include the Diagnostic Working Group meeting later today at 3 p.m. Eastern. There's a Community Committee meeting tomorrow at 12 Eastern. Sorry for the Eastern, because that's what shows up when I'm looking at the calendar. The NAPI team gets together at its weekly time at 1:30 Eastern tomorrow as well. There is also a Security Working Group meeting at 3 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. And there is a discussion on the Node.js end user feedback on Friday. Next week, the benchmarking work group meets on Monday at 3 p.m., the build working group at 6 p.m., and then we're back to this meeting, the TSC meeting at 5 p.m. Because it rotates time, so that's the time for next week. Any questions on the streams yet? I don't see any. I'm
No, I
going to
don't see any.
issue. I don't see on the issue any on the issue either, so I guess we'll assume there aren't any for this week. And I think we're at the end of the meeting. Thanks to everybody for showing up, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks.